no option.
Well,
Truman, your next question.
You had an option, sir. You could have said, I am not going to do it.
Well, that moment in the 1984 debate between John Turner and Brian Mulroney was a defining one, and it helped lead Mulroney to one of the largest majorities in Canadian history. But truth be told, few debates have defining moments. That's not stopping the political parties from positioning how they want this year's election debate or debates to unfold. Andrew's in Toronto tonight, Chantal is in Montreal, Bruce is in Ottawa. Do debates matter, Andrew?
Oh, they certainly matter. Whether or not they have that kind of decisive, defining moment, as you say, they oftentimes do influence people's perceptions of the leaders, sometimes in ways that we in the pundit class don't pick up on immediately, but it shows up later in the campaign. There's lots of examples, not only of that clip of Mulroney and Turner, but Turner versus Mulroney in 1988. I think too often, however, they don't have the impact they could have, which is not so much these defining moments, these knockout blows that we're looking for, but really educating the public on who the leaders are and what they stand for. There's a much more opportunity there that's been unexploited from them.
Chantal?
At the time when there's declining turnout, I think they are more important than ever, not because they determine who the winner or the loser of the election will be, but because they give voters a place to come and look at the leaders outside of just the evening newscast. And there's plenty of evidence that shows that when there are debates, a lot of people do tune in and they start making up their minds after they've seen the debates. So I'm of the school that thinks that they are more useful than most of the other stuff that party leaders do.
Bruce, in your polling life, you've not only watched debates, but you've hooked people up to your machines to try and gauge their reactions to them. And do those results show that these do matter?
Well, they don't always matter, Peter, but they do matter quite a bit sometimes. And I think they probably will matter this year. I think we've got three leaders who are going to be very interesting figures for voters to watch. And of course, debates really represent the longest uninterrupted patch of really unscripted, I say unscripted, there's obviously scripting that goes on. But relative to the rest of the daytime that's spent campaigning, campaigns have become really good at scripting and structuring everything so that there are few risks of mistake. In a debate situation, there is more risk of something happening that was unintended or unexpected or unplanned. And viewers like that a lot because it does give them a sense that they're really seeing underneath the surface of these people sometimes. At least that's what they're looking for.
Well, what we've witnessed over the years, for the most part, have been two debates each campaign, one in English, one in French. Over the last 24 hours, we've seen a couple of stories, one in Chantal's paper, the Toronto Star, also in the Huffington Post. Discussion that seems to be that some of the parties, at least perhaps the Conservatives and the NDP, want to have more debates, as many as 4 debates, hoping to kind of, see whether Justin Trudeau can stand up to the rigors of a debate. If that, in fact, is the case, multiple debates, does anyone necessarily benefit from those 3 parties as a result of that? Chantal?
I don't think you can say that. Andrew was pointing out that pundits see things that are not necessarily what voters see when they watch a debate or don't watch it in the same way. And I think parties assess their rivals in ways that may not be what the voters see in the end. In this province, one network broke away from just the one big debate and had one-on-ones with the main leaders for 2 elections now. And A, the ratings were really high, and B, I have to say, just from an information standpoint, that it was really more informative than stacking all these people up, 4 or 5 of them, one evening, and then having a cacophony of sorts.
Bruce?
Well, I guess, Peter, I think that the debates do give people the opportunity to see underneath the skin of these folks, and that's what voters ultimately are looking for. In the byplay between the parties about how many debates there should be, I think the NDP is clearly thinking it can only be good for them to give Tom Mulcair more stage. I think probably the Conservatives, to some degree, think that it would be in their interest to have Justin Trudeau off the campaign trail for, what, if 5 days debates were held, that would probably be about 10 days' time. But I think it's really unlikely that the Conservatives are actually going to advocate for that many debates. It would be really out of keeping, I guess, with Stephen Harper's past as a campaigner, that he would want to expose himself to the kind of risks that incumbents have in debates, especially multiple debates.
Andrew?
Certainly the conventional wisdom that the Tories are banking on is that Justin Trudeau has the most to lose. But of course, the minute you start saying that, you get into the expectations game, that if everyone expects him to do terribly, terribly poorly, and he shows up and he doesn't trip over his shoelaces, then he becomes sort of in a weird way the winner. You think of Jean Charest in his first election in Quebec, where he showed up on the debate night, he didn't have horns on him, and people said, oh, well, maybe I should give him a chance. I think the biggest winner, of course, is the public at large if you have more of these debates. A lot of the ills of the debates that we have now is because we only have the one. So everyone's absolutely wired. The stakes are so enormous. The press treats it like a prize fight. There's very little opportunity to get into any kind of depth. If you have more debates, people can calm down, we can cover more subjects, we can learn more as opposed to, as I say, scoring them like prize fights, and we can even experiment with the format a little bit and see what kind of formats really work.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment in terms of the formats. You know, Chantal mentioned what was different the last time I go around in Quebec. It is, you know, there have been different formats over the years on the federal scene. You know, we've seen everybody at a table, people at podiums, you know, zoning it off to just one-on-ones in different cases. If you had your way, each of you, what would you propose as a single change or a single idea to make this a better format? Bruce?
Well, I would reduce the amount of involvement of moderators and outside questioners and increase the amount of time where the leaders are going at each other directly. I think that's the kind of interaction that really does give people a chance to understand who these leaders are, how they react to different pressure points, how they react to arguments on the fly. It's obviously riskier for the leaders, but from a viewer and voter standpoint, there's more in it for them if some of those aspects of the debate are removed.
Andrew?
I sort of agree with Bruce, certainly in the part about leaving out the moderators and the journalists. I'd like to see them, in a way, given more time, however, to sustain an argument. So tell me about your economic policy, and we'll give you more than 30-second soundbite. We'll give you 10 minutes. Can you fill those 10 minutes and tell us what you do about the economy? The other thing I'd say is have them in both languages. We don't have to have this business where they're only in one language so that basically only one part of the country tunes in. We're a bilingual country. We can handle, you know, dividing them up, English and French, within the same debate.
It's been a tough week for moderators and reporters. On Tuesday night, we have a panel advocating at least some are the end of anchors, and now tonight we're talking about the end of moderators. Chantal doesn't agree on that.
I am not going to do that.
Good.
I watched the Ontario debate. I watched Steve Bacon literally introduce viewers' questions. There was no follow-up, no real moderating beyond your, you know, counting the time and looking at the clock. And I don't think that debate really worked really well. It certainly didn't elicit a lot of information, and it didn't bring many challenges to the leaders. So I'm not big on the non-moderator, and I'm not big on the French-English. Not because we're not a bilingual country, but if you're going to have 5 leaders and do it in 2 languages with really unequal language skills, pity the francophones who try to struggle through that.
Okay, well, you mentioned if we're going to have 5 leaders. Quickly around the horn on this one, who should be in this debate this time around? Bruce?
Well, I think these are always difficult choices, but for my money, I would go with official parties that have official party status.
So in that case, this time around, it'll only be 3.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew?
My own preferred rule would be, do you have seats in the House and are you running candidates in every riding? But I think the long and the short of it is, it should be a rule that's set, you know, in a constant way, in a transparent way that everyone agrees is fair, rather than, as we're doing yet again, making it up on the fly with a bunch of people who have vested interests in the outcome, the party leaders and the networks. So I would include Elizabeth May, but I think we need to get beyond, you know, the ad hocness of it.
Chantal?
Well, if you include Elizabeth May, I'm not saying you shouldn't. You are certainly going to include the bloc leader in French, because it's really hard to argue that someone who won a party that won 20-some% of the vote should not be there when a party that won 6% of the vote is there. But that's why I would argue for more debates, a big debate so that people can see all the leaders on the ballot, but some format where we see the people who are actually vying to be prime minister debate each other.
Okay, got a couple of minutes for one other topic. I'd like to bring it in, and that is the continuing discussion around Bill C-51 of the anti-terrorism bill. This is what happened in the House yesterday. This is Tom Mulcair yesterday in the House of Commons. Watch this.
We're talking about the most significant changes to security legislation in this country since 2001. A bill where critical flaws are being revealed by security experts across the country every single day. It's simply reckless and irresponsible to try to ram it through without a full and proper study. Canadians deserve better, Mr. Speaker.
All right, well, I don't know whether it was that made the difference, but something happened over the last 24 hours. The government decided to allow more discussion period and more study period on the debate. Not as much as the opposition wants, but some more. Enough or not enough? Andrew?
It's a start, but it's still ridiculous. I agree with every word, or almost every word, that Tom Mulcair said here. These are extraordinary, significant changes. There have been serious and credible concerns raised about it by serious and credible people, including former prime ministers, former Supreme Court justices, law professors, etc. In 2001, when the Liberals brought in the first post-9/11 security bill, the first effort at it was judged by many people to be overbroad. They had 19 days of hearings, they heard 80 witnesses, and at the end of it, they made significant changes that improved the bill by all accounts. I don't see why this bill would require less scrutiny and less testimony than that bill did.
Chantal?
The first problem with 3 days or 8 days is the message from the government, and that message has been consistent. We're not really, you know, you can always talk, but we're not going to be listening much. This is what it is, whether it's for 60 people come to tell us that it's not good. So if a majority government won't listen, the exercise becomes an exercise in frustration. Second, I'm not so sure that the government caved to pressure and something changed. I suspect that they wanted the headline, "Government gives more time for hearings," because their first timetable was so ridiculous that it wasn't going to sustain a lot of arguments in the House of Commons. The 8 days, not much better.
They may get that headline. In fact, they are to some degree, but they also are still throwing in the face of the opposition continuously that the people are on their side on this one. This is the bill that they want. And they're kind of ramming that home. Do they run the risk of losing that advantage, Bruce?
Not imminently, I don't think, Peter. I think that, first of all, I should say that I think Tom Mulcair is doing extremely well at what he does best, which is holding the government to account on matters of substantive importance in the House of Commons. And I agree that more time spent on this bill inevitably has a chance, at least, of making it a better bill if the government will take into account some of the things that they hear. I do think, though, that the government probably doesn't mind at all having this debate stretch out a little bit further. I think it believes that it's in its interest politically to have a fight with other parties, where on the one hand you've got the Conservatives saying, we care so much about the risk of terrorism that we really want to move these agenda items forward, and we need to do it fairly rapidly. I think there's a segment of the public that says, yes, there's some merit to that argument. I think the challenge on the opposition side, and I think the Liberals have decided that they don't want this to be their ballot question. The challenge on the opposition side is to say, yes, there's a theoretical risk that your rights will be trampled upon, but that theoretical risk doesn't necessarily motivate as many people as the risk of some of the things that they know that ISIS is up to and some of the fears that they have about some homegrown activity. The government doesn't help itself, though, by keeping its cards so close to the vest. More transparency, more openness would definitely serve them well, but that isn't their style generally.
Okay, going to have to leave it at that for this week. Look forward to next week. The House not sitting next week, but at issue will be. Bruce in Ottawa, Chantal in Montreal, Andrew in Toronto.